It is hard to imagine a time when Volvo did not have the FH in its model range, and the title of King of the Road belonged to other trucks. It is even harder to picture modern European highways without one of the most recognizable trucks of the past few decades. The FH was not just another truck designed around the needs of transport companies. It may have been one of the first trucks in the industry to place the driver and his needs at the center of the entire project. That is why the FH became a truck many European drivers genuinely loved. Volvo also managed to achieve this without sacrificing the interests of fleet operators, because the FH was just as impressive in terms of performance and capability. Today, we are telling the story of what may be the most important truck in Volvo's history. The story of the Volvo FH begins in the mid-1980s. Volvo trucks were selling well around the world, but models built for different markets often differed significantly in their design. This made production less efficient, increased the number of spare parts, and created unnecessary complications in servicing and repairs. Development of the new long-haul truck took around 7 years. Volvo did not plan to simply place a new cab on an old chassis. The company was creating a common platform for future truck families, but the first priority was replacing the aging F10, F12, and F16. One of the biggest innovations was the new 12.1-liter inline-six D12A diesel engine. Volvo's older engines were still reliable, but their traditional design was becoming less suitable for electronic control and future emissions standards. With the D12A, Volvo effectively tried to move the heavy-duty diesel engine from the mechanical age into the electronic one. The new production engine combined an overhead camshaft, 4 valves per cylinder, unit injectors, and electronically controlled fuel injection. None of these technologies was new on its own. What made the D12A unusual was the way Volvo brought them together in a long-haul truck engine. This made the design more complex and expensive, but it also allowed much more precise control over fuel delivery and combustion. The decision carried real risk. Simplicity and reliability were still the main strengths of a heavy-duty diesel engine. Electronics were far less advanced than they are today, and any failure could leave the truck off the road and cost the operator money. The D12A was backed by years of testing, new manufacturing methods, support from Cummins specialists, and electronics engineers Volvo brought in specifically for the project. Its new architecture also gave the company room to develop the engine and adapt it to future requirements, without having to start again with a completely new design. The D12A was fitted only to the higher volume FH12. The flagship FH16 was less advanced from a technical standpoint. Its 16-liter engine, gearboxes, and parts of the driveline were carried over from the previous Volvo F16, although they were upgraded and given new electronic controls. The FH12 remained Volvo's main long-haul truck and covered most standard European transport work. The FH16 was intended for heavy and oversized loads, logging operations, mountain routes, and large Scandinavian truck combinations. The FH16 was the most powerful truck in the range, but Volvo made its real technological leap with the more widely used FH12. This does not mean Volvo blindly replaced everything in the new truck. The company radically redesigned the core of the vehicle, but kept proven components wherever they still made sense. The cab was not one of them, and it deserves a closer look. Volvo often claimed that the new cab had been built around the driver. It was clearly a marketing phrase, but in this case, it was not far from the truth. That raises an obvious question. Why did the Swedes place so much emphasis on the driver? Owner-drivers were not especially common in Europe, and large transport companies rarely placed the everyday comfort of an employed driver at the top of their priorities. Most long-haul trucks of the time, including earlier Volvos, already offered an acceptable level of comfort. Volvo encouraged fleet owners to see the cab as more than just a workplace and sleeping area. It was also part of the truck's overall productivity. A long-haul truck does not work on its own. Its performance is limited by the person behind the wheel. An uncomfortable seating position, noise, vibration, poor visibility, and constant fatigue increase the risk of mistakes, force more frequent stops, and ultimately reduce transport efficiency. Cab comfort was therefore presented not as an extra luxury, but as a way to keep the driver productive for longer. A good truck also helped a company attract and retain drivers. The driver might not be the person buying the vehicle, but he could still choose an employer based on the equipment he would be expected to live and work in for weeks at a time. Volvo later described the goal of the FH in very direct terms: attract the best drivers while giving the owner maximum productivity. The final purchase decision still belonged to company management, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the people who had to work in these trucks every day. To avoid deciding for drivers what they would find comfortable, Volvo involved more than 1,500 drivers and other truck users in the development process. They were asked to assess the seating position, visibility, the layout of instruments and controls, movement inside the cab, the sleeping area, and access to storage compartments. The engineers did not simply show drivers an almost finished interior and ask them to rate it. Their feedback was taken into account while the cab was still being developed. This mattered because truck ergonomics are very different from those of a passenger car. A driver does not spend just an hour or two behind the wheel. He may sit there for an entire working day, then eat and sleep only a few steps away from the driver's seat. A poorly placed switch or an awkward passage may seem like a small issue at first, but after weeks on the road, it becomes a constant source of irritation. Safety was also built into the cab from the beginning. Volvo carried out cab impact tests and designed the structure to preserve survival space around the driver in a collision. The new truck was offered with several cab options for different types of work, ranging from day cabs to the high-roof Globetrotter with more interior space. Making the cab spacious and comfortable was not enough. The larger and taller it became, the more aerodynamic drag, weight, and fuel consumption increased. The FH therefore spent a great deal of time in wind tunnels, as Volvo tried to combine a roomy interior with a more streamlined shape. The result was a sloping windshield, rounded corners, and a much more integrated front end. The FH was not the first aerodynamic European truck, but Volvo managed to create a large, long-haul cab that did not look like a giant box and still offered noticeably more space than the previous generation. 7 years of development came to an end on September 1st, 1993, when Volvo introduced the FH12 and FH16 at the same time. The reaction exceeded the company's expectations. Volvo employees later recalled that enthusiasm from dealers and customers quickly turned into real orders. The FH was named International Truck of the Year the following year, comfortably beating the Iveco Eurostar and the DAF 85 range. Sales proved that the success of the FH went far beyond positive reviews from the press. More than 120,000 trucks were sold during the first 5 years, and only 3 years later, total production had passed 250,000. The FH soon received a series of improvements based not only on the work of Volvo engineers, but also on feedback from transport companies and drivers. In 1998 and 1999, the model gained a new electronic architecture, chassis with disc brakes, and an electronically controlled braking system. The engine, gearboxes, and several other components were also improved. The changes were significant enough for the updated FH to win International Truck of the Year again, this time for 2000. Volvo could have taken a step back and looked down on its competitors. Truck model cycles are usually much longer than those of passenger cars, and the FH was still less than 10 years old. Yet the company carried out another major update at the beginning of the new millennium. The engineers once again set out to reduce operating costs, improve driver comfort, simplify daily maintenance, and refine the aerodynamics of both the cab and the entire truck. New D-shaped fuel tanks made more efficient use of the space along the frame. Visibility improved, while the headlights became more powerful and effective. After the major update of the early 2000s, which many regard as a new generation, the Volvo FH firmly secured its success. It was no longer simply a successful truck from the 1990s. It had become a family with plenty of room to evolve. One of the most important developments of this period was the I-shift transmission, introduced in 2001. The first FH had moved the truck engine from the mechanical age into the electronic one. Now Volvo was also trusting electronics to choose the gears. Many drivers were skeptical at first because they were used to having full control of the truck themselves. Over time, I-shift became one of the defining features of the FH and gradually pushed the traditional manual transmission out of Volvo's long-haul trucks. The original 1993 design could not be updated forever. Volvo therefore introduced a completely new generation of the FH in 2012. What remained from the previous truck was the name, its position as the company's main long-haul model, and the same basic idea: create a truck that worked equally well for the transport company and the person behind the wheel. Almost everything about the FH has changed over the past 30 years. The cabs, engines, transmissions, and electronics. Gas-powered and fully electric versions have also appeared. The model itself has not only survived, but remains Volvo's main long-haul truck. It all began with the first FH in 1993. It was not simply a successful truck. It created the foundation for a model Volvo could repeatedly reinvent without destroying its character or reputation.